much, Diana. I'm very happy to be here. I'm David Madigan. I'm the provost here at Northeastern. I want to welcome everyone to the webinar today. Thank you for joining us. It's the fourth webinar in our Plant Shift Initiative speaker series. This particular one focuses on sports and fitness, but the series in general has been fantastic, and we've got terrific speakers lined up for today. This initiative and the speaker series is very much consistent with Northeastern's commitment to having positive impact in the world, a focus on sustainability, on climate, on animal welfare. So these are all issues that as a university we care deeply about and are committed through our research and entrepreneurship and programs like this one here today. We're committed to having a positive impact in the world. So thank you to the speakers, the three excellent speakers lined up today, Pat, James, and Seba. I look forward to hearing what they have to say. And I certainly want to thank Jane and Sebastiano, who have been behind this initiative and are supporting this initiative and for putting all of this together. So without further ado, I'll hand it back to Diana, and let's hope we have a great session.
Thank you, Provost. And now I will pass it over to our lovely, fantastic moderator, Pat.
Thank you very much. And I will ditto that as well. Thank you to Jane and Sebastiano for putting this together. The previous sessions have been amazing, and just honored to be here with some other incredible people in the plant-based world. So super exciting. So to introduce who we have here today, we have two truly world-class athletes with us, Seba Johnson and James Wilkes. I'm sure many watching and listening are familiar with them, but if you are not, to give a little intro here, Seba is a former Olympic skier. At the age of 14, she became the youngest alpine skier in Olympic history to compete in the Winter Olympic Games back in 1988, I believe. She was also in the Olympic Games in 1992. And during that time, she also became the first Black female to compete in alpine skiing at the Olympics. So incredible. She is now a very sought after speaker, an activist in the vegan world, an artist, a yoga teacher as well. So welcome, Seba. Absolute pleasure. And I'm looking forward myself to getting to know you a little bit here as well. And we also have James Wilkes. I think many will recognize James from the recent Game Changers film. He was one of the producers of that film. James is a former UFC mixed martial artist. He was a professional from 2003 to 2012. He won season 9 of The Ultimate Fighter, which used to air on Spike TV, I believe. And now he trains some of the world's most elite military, like the Navy SEALs, US Marines, and many others. So yeah, just two incredible athletes with us today. And welcome them both. And I'm just going to get right into it here. I'd love to start off by giving you each the opportunity to just in a couple minutes kind of share your background in your own words and your journey and kind of where plant-based and veganism intertwines with that. And maybe we can start off with Seba.
Yeah, plant-based veganism played a huge part in my whole life, actually. Since birth, I've been vegan, and our mother told us exactly where certain things come from and from whom they come from. So it was never appetizing for us to eat the flesh of an animal or their secretions. But I carried that throughout my whole Olympic career as well, because I would also make sure that none of my ski wear had leather or fur or down or silk, which a lot of the ski items do have. So that was another issue, just trying to get the sponsors to coordinate, or with my ethics and my moral beliefs. But we can get more into that after. Two-time Olympian, and my skis are in the Smithsonian at the African American History and Culture Museum in Washington, D.C. So if you ever get a chance to go and see that.
Amazing. Amazing. And James?
I'll give you just a bit of background sort of in my athletic career. So I finished a degree in England in 2000 and came out to the States for 6 months. Just thought I'd sort of take a 6-month break, and trained with the gentleman that developed the Navy SEAL unarmed combat program. I thought after 6 months I'd go back and get a job. I just really enjoyed it out here. The training was great and the weather was great, and so I decided to stay. And so I kept sort of training in martial arts and felt like I really needed to test myself. So I decided to start competing in these mixed martial arts competitions. And I'd have a sort of professional fight here or there just to test my skills. And then I was turning 30 years old in 2008. And I thought, well, I don't want to look back and saying I could have been in the UFC. So as you mentioned earlier, I tried out for the Ultimate Fighter reality show. I won that in the welterweight division, which got me a contract with the UFC. And, during some of my fights, I actually got injured training leading up to one of my fights. And I thought, well, what can I do with my time? While I'm just basically doing physical therapy, I'm not able to train properly every day. Knew I'd be out for at least 6 months when I tore ligaments in my knees. So I started thinking, well, how can I be productive? So I started looking into diet for optimal recovery and athletic performance. And that's when I came across a study about the Roman gladiators. They unearthed around 5,000 bones. And I did a strontium calcium analysis and a radioisotope analysis. And they could tell that they were eating almost exclusively plants. And I thought, well, that can't be true. These original, really tough fighters living off of plants, because I thought that you needed meat, for muscle, and you needed milk for bones. And that wasn't enough to convince me, but that was enough to sort of start looking into it. So I ended up spending a lot of time looking at peer-reviewed nutrition and started interviewing experts such as the head of nutrition at Harvard, the head of anthropology at Harvard, the president of the American College of Cardiology, and started realizing that what I believed about nutrition was all really based on things I'd been fed by the industry, the marketing, and so forth, and realized that plant-based eating was actually not only just as good for athletic performance, but actually superior. So that sort of started off my plant-based journey, and that's what eventually turned into what became the Game Changers.
Yeah, beautiful. And to piggyback on that real quick, what were some of those major initial questions that you had when you were making that transition?
So for me, obviously Seba was vegan since birth.
Right.
And she was very lucky that she had those parents that were raising her that way. Obviously the biggest question that I was asking, I think that everyone was asking, is, well, where am I going to get my protein? And I quickly learned that, all protein essentially originates in plants, and animals are just the middlemen. And that those animals are doing a disservice, right? They're absorbing all the great phytonutrients and minerals and so forth. And then, you're getting the saturated fat and the animal protein itself. And you're also getting accumulation of toxins built up through the trophic levels by what they're eating. And so that sort of concern was, once I'd read the science, was sort of quickly thrown away. I'd seen the science, but I hadn't really met anybody that was really living this way. So with the combination of having seen the science and then meeting guys like Patrick Baboumian, who has the world record for carrying the most weight over 10 meters. When I started putting together the science and then seeing athletes actually living this way, I was fully convinced that you didn't really need animal protein to be big, strong, and healthy.
Yeah, and Seba, on your front, since you didn't really have a transition during your sports career, though, did you, obviously the tradition has been in athletics all around the world has been high, animal products and that kind of, as James was saying, sort of high animal protein approach to things. Were you ever, talked to by a nutritionist or coaches that you had like around your Olympic days or beyond that sort of questioned what you were doing back then?
Yeah, throughout my whole life, actually. Yeah, they thought that, you have to have animal flesh in order to build muscle, and you had to have calcium to build hard bones and all these other things. But during my whole Olympic career, I had never broken a bone. So even when I was training, when I was younger, and it wasn't until the 88 games in Calgary, Canada, when the cafeteria at the Athletes Village, I made sure that they had vegan options for me, because I wasn't going to just eat, toast the whole time I was there or whatnot. So they were able to bring in like organic berries and organic whole grain breads and all these different wonderful items that weren't there before, that didn't have like added honey or added milk or anything like that. So after a while, all the other huge like hockey players were coming to my little tiny section of that area to get all the wonderful foods, and eventually they just had to grow it bigger and bigger. So then all the other athletes from different countries were able to also indulge in completely vegan foods that give you vibrance and strength and energy. So yeah, but yeah, my whole career is about the coaches saying that you need all this stuff, and I evidently did not.
Yeah, there is certainly this idea when you hear, plant-based being talked about, or veganism being talked about in athletics. A lot of the time, it's it's possible, right? They kind of talk about it like, well, it's possible if it's done really right, and that's kind of how it's talked about. But my experience, James's experience, your experience, Seba, is not only is it possible, but it is performance enhancing. It's like, when I discovered it, it was like the keys to the kingdom, and a performance enhancer. So I'd love to, James, maybe we can go back to you. What did you experience in terms of like performance changes or overall health changes when you made the switch?
Yeah, I mean, first I'll give the caveat this obviously is anecdotal, right? So it's hard to say that the correlation that I noticed was causal by the diet, but I didn't really change anything else at the time other than my diet. So as an example, my endurance, there's a battling rope, like a 50-foot, I think 2.5-inch battling rope. And the most I'd ever done was 8 minutes. At the gym that I trained at with all professional and collegiate athletes, if you got your 10 minutes, you got your name on the wall. And there was a few people that had got 20 minutes. Within 6 weeks of going on a fully plant-based diet, I went an hour straight, and we show that in the documentary. What we didn't show in the documentary is my strength also went up. So I'd maxed out over 2 years. I couldn't get beyond 5 reps of 105-pound dumbbell press, 105-pound in each hand. I've never had a super strong chest and just couldn't get beyond that. And within weeks of going plant-based, I was able to do 6 reps at 115 pounds per arm on the bench press dumbbell. So I'd personally noticed some significant differences. And I believe, based on my own experience and also the science that I've seen, that shifting in that plant-based direction, and preferably all the way plant-based, can have benefits towards athletic performance.
And Seba, on your front, obviously you mentioned like you weren't injured often. Are there other things that you noticed that the person next to you was struggling with, or some advantage that you were given with it?
Yeah, well, my upbringing wasn't based on health. So I wish I could answer more of the health aspects of being an athlete. Mine was all about making sure that I was, trying to lessen the amount of suffering that exists in the world. And I know that animals go through so much suffering within the, way that they're artificially inseminated to be, to give birth to animals that eventually live a whole life of just pure fear and pure pain. So when you're putting all that energy into your body, and so supposedly fueling your body with that kind of protein, I would feel that energy has to go somewhere. It doesn't just dissipate. So I would notice that, especially when I was in school and my ski teammates, whenever I'd take off time from school to go train, other people were taking time off from school because they were sick, because they had congestion, because they had whatever illnesses that came from what they were putting into their vessels. So it was beautiful that once I got older and started to meet more vegans and people that knew about veganism, that they were saying how much it changed their life and how they were able to recover faster. Like a lot of the Olympians that I've spoken to, how they were able to breathe better and sleep better at night so that they could be better in the morning for their competitions. And it's just exciting that now the world is waking up to, how we fuel ourselves and how that decision affects everyone outside of you as well. The person that's going to be competing next to you, for instance, depending on where they live on this planet, and how if their water is clean, if, just the way it affects the climate as well.
For sure. Yeah. Yeah. Can we, I think it's also worth pointing out, maybe if we could distinguish between kind of, since we are talking sports here, distinguish between kind of what we're talking about when we're talking about a plant-based diet for performance, which is, I think we would all agree, whole plant foods, versus kind of in the modern times of Impossible Burgers and kind of all the potential vegan junk food we can eat. Maybe it's worth distinguishing between whole food plant-based and a quote unquote vegan diet, just because it varies so much. Maybe James or Seba, either one of you, maybe jump into the difference there.
Can I jump in? Only because when I was younger, we didn't have any beyond, all this other stuff. I'm not going to name them because I don't want to give them. Anyways, we didn't have all these plant-based hot dogs and burgers and stuff. So it was all whole food plant-based. So it goes to show you again that you don't need all that extra stuff that's compounded into a hamburger to be healthy and strong. But what I love about it is that it does help people who are transitioning from, eating animals to a vegan consumption. So, because if somebody still craves it, it's there for them without hurting anyone, any individual, as a pig or chicken or a cow or fish. But as far as the health aspect, I'm sure James would be better at that. But I think when you are considering a plant-based and vegan consumption, that you consider lives outside of your own. It's not only about our BMI or whatever else people worry about. It's about the effects that you have on this planet.
Yeah, I just want to jump in and say, I think we can distinguish between a vegan diet and a plant-based diet. So the complete exclusion of animal foods in one. And then even if you're eating completely vegan, the amount of whole foods you're eating versus some of these more processed foods. And sort of our approach is more like, it's not all or nothing, it's all or something. So certainly if people want to go all the way vegan, that's one thing. But the science really does show that the more directions you shift in a more plant-based direction, especially whole foods, the better it's going to be for your health. And given that we know that there's a lot of the same biological mechanisms that affect health also affect performance, like inflammation, endothelial function, and so forth. We're going to be better off getting more of our calories from plants, up to 100%, and then more of those calories coming from whole foods. So I think it's a challenge if people say, right, I'm going from my standard American diet or standard Western diet to a completely vegan diet, number one, and then also it's got to be all whole foods, number two. And so I think the whole foods thing is sort of more of a general heuristic than a set fast rule. And although I think, it's always compared to what, right? So if you say, well, is this new plant-based burger, is that, what are you comparing it to? Is it healthy or is it not healthy compared to what? And so if you compare it to even a grass-fed burger, there are studies showing that is going to be better for you. But if you compare that to like a lentil stew or, a 3-bean chili or something, it's not going to be as healthy, right? So I think that there's definitely room for some of these plant-based, the varying degrees of processing. But obviously trying to get in as much whole foods as possible, I think is the way to go, and getting those as much as possible from plants rather than from animal foods as well. So it's not all or nothing, it's really all or something.
Yeah, so you guys, I'm sure with your platforms, you talk to people all the time. You probably talk to athletes all the time. What would you say for somebody listening that is trying to head that direction? Do you recommend a slow transition? Do you recommend just jumping in all or nothing? What kind of advice do you have on that front?
Seba, you want to go?
I recommend thinking outside of yourself only. Like I recommend like what is going to help you definitely health wise, but also help other individuals you share this planet with. You know, eating that, I don't know what, bacon, whatever, lettuce, tomatoes sandwich or whatever it is that people make, is that going to just satisfy your taste buds and then, you know, you'll have to worry about all the cholesterol, whatever else that comes with it? Or, you know, I mean, I feel like people, I think it's about time that we start considering lives outside of our own. And, you know, no one wants to be born just to be slaughtered. So, I mean, I really do hope that people consider where every item that they put on their plate comes from and how it came to be, even if they are supposedly humane slaughtered or whatever. Still, it's about wanting to alleviate the amount of suffering that exists in the world. Golly, I wish I could say something that's more beautifully colored, but I just think it's very important that we realize that animals have feelings and the want to live healthy and free, just like we do.
Yeah, and Seba, let me, if I may jump in, James, let me ask you just that approach of your life, right? Of thinking of others, of, you know, that compassionate thought, like in leading from that place, would you say that has impacted your health? Just living life that way?
It's impacted every aspect of my being, honestly, because during the 1994 Olympics, which were going to be held in Lillehammer, Norway, which I qualified for, I protested and I boycotted those games, and I didn't go compete in what would have been my third Olympic Games because Norway had just lifted the moratorium on minke whale hunting. And there was no necessity whatsoever for bringing that into existence again, you know, to kill whales. So that ended my whole Olympic career, along with the death threats and poison pen letters that I was having to deal with at such a young age as the only Black person in what they called a white man's sport. And then in a World Cup downhill, I was supposed to wear a suit that had a patch of leather that was sewn into the ski suit. And I told them that no, because I felt a dead cow had no place on my body as I skied down the mountain in this World Cup ski race. And actually Wilt Chamberlain was at the bottom of the race waiting to see this Black woman ski down. So I feel like with our, as an athlete or an entertainer, or whoever you are, a writer, an artist, you have such a big impact you can make based on what it is that you're doing in this life. So you can carry that into, like I did, carry it into my sports and taught people that, you know, you don't need leather and all this other stuff. As far as my health, I never got sick growing up. I never, and I was strong. It wasn't until 2008 that I had a bad ski accident, but that was long after I retired from ski racing and broke my pelvis in 3 places and was bedridden for 6 months. But the doctors told me that it would take 6 months for me to heal. In actuality, I was able to walk in I think 2.5 months, but not a long ways. Of course, I had to go through aquatic therapy and whatnot. But all I was craving during those times in the hospital was tofu and avocado and basil and black olives for some reason, only those 4 items. And it made me strong. And I was able to go and become a certified yoga teacher. And yeah, so it affects all parts of your life if you let it.
And Pat,
I love it.
Just wanted to jump back into sort of whether people should jump in overnight or gradually. I think, you know, everybody's different, different personalities, but I will say that like this is a habit, you know, eating is a habit that people have been doing their whole lives, you know, 3 times a day. And sometimes I think it is difficult to transition overnight. And sometimes, you know, for example, standard American diet, people eat around 15 grams of fiber a day. And for some people, if you suddenly start eating 40, 50, 60 grams of fiber, your microbiome, the bacteria in your gut, need time to change. And if you just do it overnight, sometimes some people will get a bit of gastrointestinal distress with gas and bloating, and that can put them off and they sort of go back. So I think some people can certainly do it overnight and do really well, whereas other people might want to sort of take it gradually. And we've got to remember that, you know, a lot of people think it's just normal, natural, and necessary to be eating meat and dairy and so forth. And it takes a while for their mindset to change. And I think that for me, personally, because I thought it was normal, natural, and necessary to start with, there's sort of like a barrier up to accept some of the environmental and ethical factors, right? But once you start eating this way, I think, and realize you don't need it, and you feel just as good or better, and your athletics is just as good or better, then I think your mind opens up to more of the environmental and ethical sort of concerns of it. But yeah, I just think everyone's different. And so some people, sure, it might work overnight, especially if they, they've got diabetes or they're significantly overweight, and they'll start seeing those benefits very quickly. So they're more likely to stick with it. Whereas other people, perhaps they're younger, they don't really have any medical issues, and they might not notice the huge difference in change of how they feel as much, potentially. And so, for some of those folks, it might be better to go more gradually. I think it just depends on the individual.
Yeah, and to piggyback on that, I think, and maybe this might be in the questions as well, but at least a question I get a lot that I'm sure you guys do too, and I hear it in kind of the health and wellness world all the time of the idea that everybody's different. And great, James, your whole food plant-based diet worked for you, and Seba, clearly it's worked your entire life. But I have different ancestors, and I have different needs, and I'm a different human, and I need animal products. Like, how do you guys kind of approach that question when it comes up? And what would you say to somebody that is wondering that as well?
I mean, one of the things, and there's an example of that, there'll be people that say, just yesterday, someone was asking me about the blood type diet.
Right.
And saying, well, I've got a different blood type, so I should eat differently. And certainly some people can do better with more carbs or more fat and so forth. But there's actually a review of the 1,400 studies in the scientific literature that look at the blood type diet, and there wasn't a single one where it was found to be any credibility whatsoever. So, I mean, we're all the same species, and we certainly may have differences in terms of we might do a bit better with certain macronutrients. But in terms of, one sort of blood type or some sort of ancestry requiring meat or requiring dairy, it is just nonsense. And so there's no reason that if people have got access to it, of course, that they shouldn't be able to shift to, a largely plant-based diet or a completely plant-based diet if they want to. I should note there that people, definitely should be taking a B12 supplement, and there's a couple other things they should look at if they're going to be completely vegan. Yeah, if it's available to you, and you're living in a developed world and you have access to grocery stores, everyone should be able to thrive on a completely plant-based diet.
Seba, any input there?
And to veggie back instead of piggyback on.
I'm sorry, that's what I should be using.
Is that not only if people have access, but everyone should have access to fresh foods. And as we know, that's not the case, especially here in the United States, which is really ridiculous. But as far as, can you repeat the question? Only because I was going to say something specific.
The idea that, everybody's different and different blood types and different backgrounds, and one diet isn't right for every single human. Yeah,
well, once you do make that decision, what you'll find, which I think is really beautiful about veganism, is that your body will start telling you exactly what you need as well. And that's what I've always done. I've always listened to what my body craves. And thank goodness I don't crave, sweets or salty stuff, but I crave like greens. There'll be times when I crave kale or collard greens or arugula, like an abundance of arugula, and your body starts telling you exactly what it needs in order to thrive. So I think that's a beautiful thing that you'll notice once you continue putting more wonderful fresh things into your body, and all those cravings that you had for whatever animal flesh that you once ate will go away. It'll dissipate, and then also you'll see the reactions that your body has to the stuff that you eat versus the stuff that you will no longer eat. And you'll rather be healthy than be, having bloating issues or digestion issues because of, the stuff that you should eliminate from your vessel.
Awesome. I love it. So we're about a half hour in, so I'd love to kind of engage people that are watching and listening here. with some questions. And I think, as we were saying before, I think that's probably a great way to bring people value here. So I'm going to rattle off a few, and any of us can answer here. So Gregory is asking, I'd be interested to hear the panelists' thoughts on the health quality of plant-based and alternative proteins that have emerged over the past few years. So we've touched on that a little bit. I don't know if anybody wants to hit it one more time.
Yeah, I'm not sure that I'm not sure where that question was directed at completely. I don't know if they're talking about the proteins that are put into some of these processed foods, or if they're talking about the quality of plant-based protein versus animal protein. So we could sort of touch on both of those. So again, eating whole foods as much as possible, but not a steady and fast rule. And then in terms of the quality of the protein, there's this myth that plant protein is inferior, and it's a little bit complex because I wouldn't say it's 100% a myth. So for example, if someone was in a developing world and they only had access to 20 grams of protein a day, and they just didn't have access to lots of plant foods, then in that case, they might be better off actually. I mean, obviously it's important to get enough calories to even survive, right? So there are places in the world where you just couldn't live on a completely plant-based diet because the foods aren't available. And in that case, if the protein was very low, there actually might be an argument for, say, getting in some extra whey protein to increase the protein quality. But in the developed world where people can eat enough calories, the amount of protein is not a problem at all. And the amino acid profile of the foods is also not a problem. I mean, we eat certain, some plant-based foods are lower in certain amino acids and higher in others, but you generally don't eat just one type of food. If all you ate was white rice, then yeah, you might be lower in a particular amino acid like lysine, for example. But given that people are eating a sort of a broad range of different plant foods, the body breaks down the proteins in certain amino acids, and then it builds them up again to use them for what it needs. And there's just no issue at all in that scenario with plant-based proteins. And in fact, there may be some benefits to having lower sulfur-containing amino acids, which are found higher in meat. So the amino acid profile actually might be better. There's this sort of Western mindset that more is better. And so like more protein is better than less protein, and better, higher quality amino acids, getting more of those in is better, but they actually might be problematic. And that actually might be another benefit in terms of health from getting all of your protein from plants.
Awesome. So next one here, asking what you guys think the best way to get more athletes to move that way. And I'll kind of combine it with another question on, if their coaches are saying no. And obviously a lot of the times we're going to have coaches of like an older generation that are probably old school thinkers in that regard. What should we be doing to get more athletes go that way, and any barriers you think we can help knock down there?
Well, I think James did a great service to athletes by making your film, Game Changers, which you contacted me for when it was just a brainchild
Very early on, yeah.
way back then. But yeah, if they watch that, and I have spoken to a lot of football players who've watched it and changed their consumption overnight. So evidently it was powerful. I still want to see it. But, if you do have like an old school coach or trainer or whoever, you still have to think for yourself. I mean, this is still your moments on earth. So how is it that you want to feed yourself that to be the best that you can? And then once you go out on your own and go by what your gut is telling you about what your gut wants to process, then you can show your old school teachers or coaches how much it benefited you, and then you could help change that person's mind. So I wish you all the best.
I just add on to that. I mean, I think showcasing role models like Seba having done really well, at the Olympic level. Of course, the science is interesting, but a lot of people that's just not enough for them. And so if we can showcase athletes that are really doing well, I think that speaks a lot to, these people that are aspiring athletes that are just questioning whether it's right for them or not.
For sure. Yeah. And to veg you back on that, Yeah, I think I think in just about every sport now, for the most part, there is somebody like that to look to. You know, you're seeing it specifically more in the NFL here in the U.S., definitely in the NBA. Even linemen that you highlighted, James, in the film, and some of the bigger dudes, you know, the 300-pound dudes, and some of the larger women as well, and fit and strong women as well throughout sports, including people like Serena Williams. So there really is, if you're interested, like in your specific sport, for the people listening, you know, a quick Google search and you will find people in your sport that are doing it at the professional level. So there is another question on supplements, James. I know you touched on that one. You mentioned B12. Could we maybe get maybe into a couple other ones that people generally have questions on there?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, so B12 would be the one that people really should be taking. And now some people say, well, I don't take a B12 supplement, but they might be getting it sort of supplemented in their, you know, their milk or plant-based milk or whatever in some way. I think we just take a step back from that, though. A lot of people will say, well, how can the vegan diet be natural if you're having to supplement things? Well, first of all, the natural argument I don't find extremely strong, but like, I don't think things have to be natural to be necessarily the best, right? But also what we have to keep in mind is that people on an animal-based diet are also supplementing. So a lot of animals that people eat are fed B12 and fed a whole host of multivitamins. Iodine, for example, one of the biggest sources of iodine in the US is from a potassium iodide, which is used to clean the teats of cows and used to clean the inside of milk tankers. And so you just they're getting it supplemented anyway. So it's not a problem that your diet requires some supplements if it does. B12 certainly, and obviously you should look for a reputable source or talk to your doctor on the amounts for that. I personally take 2,000 milligrams once a week. And then vitamin D is depending on, and this is not just for plant-based eaters, by the way, up to 40% of people are low in B12, and that includes mostly meat eaters. So unless you're getting it tested, it's just safer to take a B12 supplement. Vitamin D depends on where you live, and if you're getting enough sun exposure and the shade of your skin. The darker you are, then you need a little bit longer in the sun to get that vitamin D production. And so it depends on where you live, away from the equator, and also the time of year. And you can look that up online and obviously talk to a medical professional about that. And then, you know, an algae-based DHA supplement. I think there's sort of research on both sides of that. I think for insurance, it would probably be a good bet to take some of that. Some people convert what's called ALA from things like flaxseed and walnut into a DHA or EPA. And a lot of people then will take a fish oil supplement to get the DHA and EPA, and there's no need to do that. Where did the fish get it from? The fish get it from algae. So if you do feel like you need to take an EPA DHA supplement, you're much better off getting it from algae, which is across the board. It's always better to eat lower on the food chain, right? Because you always get bioaccumulation of toxins and these persistent organic pollutants. Like fish, for example, mercury, right? You're going to get more mercury as you eat larger breeds of fish, if that makes sense. So it's better to get your DHA EPA from algae-based supplement if you are going to do that. But I think B12, number one, D, depending on how much sun you're getting and where you live, and then, potentially an algae-based DHA EPA supplement.
Awesome. And somebody specifically in another question asked about leucine, which they believe is only in animal meat, if you want to address that one.
Yeah, no, I mean, so leucine, it's not only in animal meat, it is in higher quantities, and it is a key driver of muscle mass. But you can certainly get it on a plant-based diet. I think, you know, if you're trying to get high levels of leucine, then you do have to be a bit more cognizant on a plant-based diet to dial it in a little bit, but it's certainly an important driver for muscle growth. Getting too much leucine may also be an issue as well, in stimulating the mTOR pathway, which can actually potentially increase cancer growth. So just eating a bunch of meat is not going to be great in that regard either. But if your goal is to maximize muscle mass, you do want to get a certain amount of leucine during the day. But I don't think we want to get into like all the details at this point.
Cool. And another one here from Andrea, which is a great question here, and one I was going to ask is, do you think athletes like yourself and Seba, you were doing this before it was in vogue and the cool thing to do, using your platform to speak about these issues and the impact that we can all have, especially with athletes with platforms, to influence people to move this way for their health, for animals, for the planet? What do you recommend on that front in terms of using your platform to speak about these things?
Yeah, especially when you're an Olympian and you're at the Olympic Games and you have all the media and then in the eyes of the world on you. And that's why I was very proud of 2 Olympians this year, and I'll talk about them in a second. But yeah, with that access to, to all these listening ears, definitely use that moment that you're there. Of course, it's about you doing as best as you can and, winning a gold or silver or whatever, or just doing as good as you can. But also about with that time you have there, there's like youngsters who want to be like you when they grow up. There's adults who wish they had gone that route. There's, all these different companies that could benefit from what you have to say. So use that time when you're at, a World Cup or the Olympics, or even at your, I guess it's Division A or whatever it's called, that's more local. Use your voice to say, okay, this is how I got here. These are my how far it got me, my body, my health, and all this other stuff. And then, in all the countries that these athletes are from, they'll realize, okay, there's certain things that we have to tweak in the way we do things so that we can be better contributors to this planet while we're here, and leave a beautiful, gorgeous place for people that will come along after we're gone. So I love that question, Andrea, because, it's not only about, winning. It's not only about winning, it's about winning at your moments here on Earth and how you are affecting individuals long after you are gone.
I love it. James, any advice on that front? And maybe I'll spin it for you a little bit. I know a lot of athletes kind of like to stay in their lane a little bit, and they focus on the health and they focus on the performance aspect of things. And even though they are vegan for all the reasons you are vegan, how do you sort of recommend towing that line? Whereas maybe for an athlete that wants to invite in the most people, how you kind of draw that line of what to say and maybe what to hold back based on what your platform is about?
Yeah, I mean, I think people should be authentic, right? And I think fortunately we've got great spokespeople across all sort of fields, but especially in sports. Not all athletes went vegan for the performance benefits or for the health benefits. Some are vegan for, environmental factors or ethical factors. And I think there's lots of great arguments, right? It's like a win-win-win-win, just going plant-based and preferably going all the way vegan. But I think people should just be authentic and speak what they're passionate about. And so we're going to get people that came more from the athletic performance angle, or people like Seba or Patrick Baboumian in the Game Changers, one of the world's strongest men. He saw a little bird and thought, and was rescuing it. And then he went back home and ate chicken. And he was like, why am I doing this? This doesn't make any sense. So I think people should just be authentic and, and speak their truth, basically. I mean, for me, it came from more of originally a bit more of a sort of what I would consider selfish point of view, right? Looking at athletic performance. And then I was more opened up to some of the environmental and ethical issues once I was making the transition. But I think overall, people are just really trying to figure out, the reason that people are here on this looking at this panel is because they want to learn more about how to do it and reasons for doing it. And actually, with the Game Changers Institute, which is our nonprofit, we've recently partnered with the Green Sports Alliance to become their exclusive nutrition partner. And we're putting together a manual, if you will, a plant-powered performance playbook, which is going to sort of help answer all of these questions and more that people are asking here on the panel today. Like, why should we change? What are we changing? What nutrients could be, or what are the nutrients of concern? And so I think this is a habit that people have been doing for years. and you want to make sure if they make the shift, they're doing it properly. And so I think it's great that people are here taking an hour out of their time. So I feel honored that people are coming to listen to all of us today, because they're taking that step to get a little bit educated and learn something. And so whether it's on the sort of performance side, more what we're focused on at Game Changers Institute, or more on the ethical side, like Seba and Patrick Boomy and so forth, it's just important for people to listen and get some education on it.
Seba, it looks like you had a thought on that.
I had a lot of thoughts. No, but I noticed something that, but no, that's beautiful. Speaking of that, that you're going to have a guide that will teach people, and I guess maybe, coach them as they go along in their transition. So that's beautiful. Thank you for having that kind of service. I saw a question from Hakeem. It says, how do you see the vegan word spreading in the African American or African diaspora and other communities? Is there a need to amplify? Speaking of guides, there's an African American vegan starter guide that you can go online and get. It's for free, or you can have them sent to your house and you can pass them out to your family and friends. And inside this African American vegan starter guide is a lot of great information from a vegan doctor by the name of Dr. Milton Mills, and vegan parents who've decided to raise their children vegan since birth, and vegan everything, vegan chefs. So it covers a lot of different aspects of everyday life, and exactly like how to conduct yourself if you're to go home for Thanksgiving, and what you could possibly bring to contribute to people eating more healthy and not a dead bird on their table. And when it comes to African Americans and the African diaspora, two different things I want to talk about is that there are so many people, like in Texas, they have a huge vegan population of African Americans. In Georgia, a lot of different places. And then there's also people who are doing amazing work within their own community. So it's not like, anyone outside of the community has to come and teach them anything, because they already got it going on, because they're taking empty lots and making gardens out of the empty lots in their own communities. There are like people like Brenda Sanders in Baltimore. She's doing amazing work. So please do look up her and try to support her in any way you can financially. And there's people right here where I live in Los Angeles by the name of Olympia Offset of Supermarket. What she does is she brings organic, affordable foods to places like Inglewood and different places. And people who want to help their communities need financial assistance to continue it and keep it going. As far as the African diaspora, my father's from Burundi, East Africa, I'm half Tutsi. And all of my family on my father's side were so strong naturally, not from lifting weights, not from taking protein powders or anything like that, but because they were eating root vegetables. They were eating stuff that's grown from the earth. With very little meat, because it's a whole different thing with financial stuff as well. So it just goes to show you that it's already existing. And I just hope that people change before I die. I want to see the whole world vegan. Just like that was my wish when I was a kid, and hopefully we're going in that direction.
I love it. Yeah, and on something you mentioned earlier, a question from Adrian. I hope I'm saying that right, or Adriana. But do you have any tips on specifically vegan athletic apparel and equipment? Do you know of any brands you use or anything like that?
Well, in the sport of ski racing, all your equipment, other than the clothing, is going to be pretty much vegan. The clothing is the part that's not vegan. And if you're a football player, I highly encourage you to try to make sure that all your equipment is vegan. But yeah, I can't think of one in particular one that I can. Maybe James and I will start a company.
Yeah, one of the companies I use, just because I'm in martial arts, there's a company called Sanibel. So all of their products are vegan, including these leather made from cactus, or cacti, I suppose, but cactus leather gloves, which are actually superior. Another thing, actually, talking outside of athletics, but there's this new motorcycle leather, which is synthetic, which is way more protective than animal leather as well. So better abrasion resistance, tear resistance. So I also use that for my motorcycle as well. But yeah, pretty much everything you can get, it's going to be just as good or better in the fitness world if it's made from non-animal products.
And I will give a shout out to Plant Athletic. If you cycle, if you do triathlon, they have running gear, incredible products as well, if you're into that. Another one for James here. Any new research since the Game Changers has come out that you want to make us aware of?
I mean, yeah, there's been a lot of research backing up what we talked about in the film. There was a study recently that talked about, well, they actually did a controlled trial looking at people on eating meat and people eating plant-based then they both had 1.6 grams of 1.6 grams per kilogram of body weight per day. And at that range, there was exactly the same growth in muscle mass on the same workout plan. So just goes to show that you just don't need animal protein. We're also putting out some research through the Game Changers Institute. Recently, we put out a sort of review paper on the new DS protein scoring system and showing its flaws, especially as it relates to plant-based diets. So people have probably heard of PDCAS for protein scoring. There's a new one called DS, DIASS. Yeah, there's just a lot of flaws with these protein scoring systems that basically were originally thought of and funded by the dairy industry and then somewhat by the meat industry. So we're just putting out some papers through Game Changers Institute as well, but there's been a whole host of research papers coming out sort of backing up the claims that we made in the documentary. I think one of the things we haven't really talked about is the environment as well, right? So we've both talked about athletic performance and health, and Seba's talked a lot about the ethics of eating animals, but the environment, it's the number one thing that you can do to have a beneficial impact on the environment, right? With climate change and soil erosion and loss of species, there's nothing that you can do. You can take less showers and change your light bulbs and drive an electric car, but that all pales in comparison to switching over to a plant-based diet. Just significantly less footprint. Even water use, for example, switching to a completely plant-based diet, you'll save around 1 million liters of water per person per year. People don't realize that most of the water they're consuming is not what they're consuming at home in their showers and running the sink, but it's actually from the water that was used to grow the crops to feed the animals that we're eating. So from water pollution to water use to climate, it's the most important thing we can do. And actually there's a documentary which I was fortunate to be an executive producer on with Kate Winslet and Richard Branson. There's a red carpet premiere actually I'm going to in LA tonight, but it comes out in theaters for one night only on September 16th. So people should go check that out. And then eventually it'll be on all those other platforms. But that really goes into the environment. That's called Eating Our Way to Extinction. And hopefully that doesn't happen and people will actually change their diets.
Awesome. I'll combine two of these questions here. What do you think, this one specifically about Northeastern, what can somebody like Northeastern or policy leaders do to kind of shift the way we do things? I'm assuming we're talking about food in schools and just overall policy for your school or your town or your city. How do we kind of get this more ingrained with the conversations there?
Well, school districts have a huge role to play, especially at elementary school level as well. They force the children, whoever want a lunch, they force them to take a carton of milk with every lunch. And I worked in a school, in an elementary school, and I noticed that a lot of the kids weren't drinking their milk. They didn't want it, but they had to take it in order to have their lunch. So, but then it shows that the milk industry is doing quite well because all these milks are supposedly being consumed and they're not, they're being poured down the drain. So then you're like violating these mother cows, so it's quite wasteful. So LAUSD, I know that there's Physicians Concerned for Responsible Medicine, PCRM, is working with LAUSD to try to get them, alternatives to cow's milk. As far as Northeastern University, I took some classes there when I was graduated from Howard University. I needed some extra credits. But I hope that Northeastern in their cafeteria has, I don't know if they do by now, but hopefully they have a whole vegan menu for their students. I hope every college and university will have vegan menus for their students to be healthy. And I love the fact that you can go into any restaurant now and they have at least one vegan option. So that's a great advantage that humans of today have. Yeah, so schools and places like that have a huge responsibility, and it's important that they get up with the times and try to save this planet while we still can.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We're getting up on an hour here. I would love to give you both the opportunity to, if there's anything on your mind that we haven't talked about that you'd like to leave as parting words with. I think we have mostly students listening. So anything you'd like to leave people with?
I just wish you guys the best. You're at a great time in your life where you can start developing parts of what you want to, how you want to make the biggest contribution to this planet while you're here. Definitely go strong, headstrong, because we need new ideas in this world, and you guys are going to be the ones that provide them. And just, really be considerate about, every aspect of each one of our lives, especially with the consumption that we have on this planet. And I wish you guys the best, and just because you're here today shows that you have an interest, and I wish you all the best. And contact me if you want on Instagram, Seba Johnson _vegan since birth, and I'll help in any way. I do a lot of interviews and things for kids who are working on there. Sorry, don't let me to call you guys kids, because I was once there, I was a student. But yeah, I want to help in any way I can. And I have a book coming out. I have a memoir that it talks about all the challenges that I experienced as a vegan athlete, and a Black person in that sport, and a Black person in the United States. So I hope you guys look out for that as well.
Awesome. James?
Yeah, I just want to thank everyone for participating today, and thank Northeastern for having me on, and Pat for moderating, and Seba for joining us as well. Yeah, I mean, for me, I think it's just, give it a try, and there's a bunch of things you can do. You can make simple swaps, like instead of cow's milk, have a plant milk like soy milk or rice milk, hemp milk, some other sort of plant milk. If there's some things that you're already eating that's vegan, so you're probably, let's say you eat a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, like instead of eating that once every 2 weeks, eat it once every week. You can just start things that you're already familiar with, right? If you're already eating things that are plant-based. And then try and veganize some of your recipes, right? So if you had a beef chili, you can have a 3-bean chili. Or if you're eating, my wife makes a great cottage pie that's got lentils in it instead of beef. So try and think of ways you can switch it. There's plenty of recipes all over the internet. GameChangersMovie.com has a bunch of free recipes and tips. And there's just tons of other great websites out there. So it shouldn't be difficult. And especially today with the internet and all the access to all the different foods at the grocery stores, I would say just give it a try and see how you feel, and take it at your own pace. If you want to jump all in, go for it. If you want to take time, and you might not even have a set goal of eventually being vegan, but a lot of people will just sort of start feeling great. They feel better about themselves. They feel better about what they're doing for the planet. They feel better what they're doing for animals. And that actually ends up shifting a lot of people completely vegan, even though they didn't originally set out to do that. So yeah, I'd say give it a try. If you haven't seen Game Changers movie, obviously watch that. Check out Eating Our Way to Extinction that's coming out as well. And yeah, people can hit me up through, I'm pretty responsive too on Instagram if they want to ask any questions.
And I also want to encourage people to also look into Ayurvedic consumption. Someone asked about yoga and why aren't people more plant-based in yoga? And if you look into Ayurvedic consumption, you'll also find out about your dosha and what types of foods that will be best for your dosha. You'll find out about it once you look it up.
I love it. I love it. And I will end by saying, not to be overwhelmed by any of this and the information, and know that really you're just one choice and one commitment and one decision away. I'm here today because I just changed my 4 eggs in the morning with a green smoothie of amazing whole plant foods. And that was really the spark to me, completely changing my health, changing my athletic performance, and being health free and being able to connect with amazing people like you. So just one decision away. I always like to say that, just one commitment away. So thank you, James and Seba, so much. This has been incredible.